Welcome back to MTN Fantasy Football Week number 9 recap. We go over some of the best performances, some of the disappointing performances. Let me address this first, everyone. I had James Conner in my sit section from the Friday video or Saturday video. I apologize. I mean, first off, I had no idea Chase Edmonds was going to get hurt in the first quarter, but second off, just had no clue James Conner was going to go off and put up 40 points. So if you benched him because of my advice, I actually feel terrible about that. So I know it's fantasy. You can't get everything right. And I feel like my process was right, but James Conner just played basically all the snaps. I mean, Benjamin played a bit, but still, it was just James Conner had a tremendous game, as we know. So anyway, before we get into like the best performances and whatnot, let's look at some of the news and injuries out there. So nothing's finalized with these injuries, but Chase Edmonds left in the first quarter, as we know. Ankle injury, don't know the severity of that. We'll find out more tomorrow probably. Ezekiel Elliott left at one point with a knee injury that popped up. He's been dealing with a knee injury, but then came back in the game, so he should be okay, hopefully. Devonta Booker had a hip injury, left in the fourth quarter, but he had a great game, of course. Didn't have like the best fantasy day, but had a pretty good day for the Giants. But the Giants have a bye in week 10, so Devonta Booker should be good to go. But plus, Saquon Barkley should be back by that point anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. Zack Moss had a concussion in that game in Jacksonville for the Buffalo Bills, so add Devin Singletary. I mean, I don't know if Zack Moss is going to play next week, but Devin Singletary would be a really nice play next week against the Jets if Zack Moss were to miss. Desean Jackson is signing with the Las Vegas Raiders, no surprise there. I'm not too interested in him, honestly. I mean, if you can't draft a best ball now, obviously, but if you're playing like daily fantasy, like DFS, that type of stuff, maybe Desean Jackson will have some weeks, but for season long, I'm not really trying to pick up Desean Jackson right now. Let's see how it plays out first. Daryl Henderson, the Rams running back, at one point was questionable to return with an ankle injury, but he came back right away, so Daryl Henderson seems to be fine. Hopefully that's okay going forward. So that's pretty much it for the news and injuries. Maybe I missed some things, but as of now, that's pretty much the major stuff that we took care of here. All right, let's start on the positive side. Some of the better performances this week in fantasy. The top quarterback right now, this is not including the Monday night game, of course, and part of the Sunday night game as well is still going on here. It's late in the fourth quarter. Adrian Peterson actually just scored a touchdown, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, not everything is set in stone yet, but this is what we have so far. So Lamar Jackson is the number one quarterback on the week so far. He's been there many times. Lamar had 120 rushing yards, so 12 points is a pretty damn good floor. You throw in the 3 passing touchdowns he had and the 266 passing yards, and boom, there's 32 fantasy points right there. Matt Ryan had 28.52 fantasy points here, so he had 2 touchdowns to Zacchaeus. Matt Ryan, for the most part, had a good game in this one against a tough Saints defense. I don't think many people were streaming Matt Ryan based on the matchup, but if you did, then hey, it worked out. Matt Ryan had a great game, and he's definitely earned my respect as a streamer going forward. It depends on the matchup, of course, but Matt Ryan was really good in this game, and Cordero Patterson continues to kill it as a Falcons. Is he a running back, receiver? I don't know. Falcons playmaker, Cordero Patterson. Justin Herbert was supposed to be number 2. I don't know why I put him behind Matt Ryan, but you get it. So number 2 is Justin Herbert. Herbert had 356 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion. This was a tough matchup against a really good Philly secondary, but he found a way to get it done here. Justin Herbert, there was no rushing touchdowns for the Chargers in this game, and when you have the 2 passing touchdowns, a 2-point conversion, all those passing yards, it's going to add up to a pretty big week. So he did his job, and Justin Herbert was actually playing in a pretty neutral game script here. Of course, the Eagles had that last-second loss there on the field goal, but Justin Herbert was able to bounce back here off some pretty underwhelming performances and has now kind of earned our trust here going forward. I was not a big fan of the matchup for Justin Herbert, but hopefully he was in your lineup this week. Next, we have Josh Johnson, not the Miami Marlins pitcher Josh Johnson. This is Josh Johnson, the quarterback that's played for like half the NFL teams. He had 25.48 fantasy points on Thursday night at the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, did not start the game. Mike White started the game and actually looked pretty good. Then hurt his like wrist or finger or hand, whatever the injury was, or elbow maybe. Couldn't throw the ball, couldn't grip the ball. So Josh Johnson came in pretty much in garbage time because Indianapolis was up so early in that game. But Josh Johnson came in and basically had an awesome game. He had 3 passing touchdowns, 317 passing yards, and 18 rushing yards. It's not really relevant, of course, but it's cool to see Josh Johnson in here. It's funny how fantasy works sometimes. And on the other side of that game, Carson Wentz had 24.18 fantasy points at home against the Jets on Thursday. Carson had 272 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 13 rushing yards as well. So Carson Wentz was pretty efficient in that game. Most of it was the running backs between Nahim Heinz and Jonathan Taylor, who are in this category as well for running backs, but Carson Wentz got his touchdowns to Michael Pittman, did his thing, and Carson Wentz in the right matchups is a good streamer, as we know. For running backs, James Conner, as I mentioned on the top, got that one very wrong, so once again, I apologize for that. But James Conner had 21 carries, 96 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 5 receptions, 77 yards, had a long receiving touchdown on a screen pass, and a receiving touchdown as well. So James Conner was unbelievable. Yes, a lot of it was because of the injury to Chase Edmonds. Now, Chase Edmonds is out going forward. If he misses some time with the ankle injury, James Conner becomes like a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. Like, he would be a very good startable piece every week, and it would help even more if Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins get back as well. So keep an eye on James Conner. I benched him in a league I had to win in as well. Now I'm probably going to lose because of me benching him. So trust me, guys, I'm with you with that. I'm pissed at myself, but it is what it is. All right, so next, Jonathan Taylor, who's been on an absolute tear lately. 19 carries, 172 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 28 receiving yards on 2 receptions. He's been unbelievable lately. He's had at least 18 full PPR points since week 4. So he had that bad stretch in week 2 and week 3 where he had 6 and 8 points. But since then, he's been at 20, 31, 28, 18, 21, now 34. Jonathan Taylor has been unbelievable. He's in a great situation. Hopefully he's on your team. Nick Chubb is next. This is the guy that I had as a buy candidate, so at least I had some good advice. But Nick Chubb had 21 carries, 161 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. I think almost had 2 actually, and had 1 reception for 9 yards. So as I said in last week's videos, with Kareem Hunt out, I mean, Nick Chubb is by far the running back 1 on this team. As we know, Dearness Johnson's getting some carries. I think Dearness had 8 carries for 16 yards, so he was not very efficient. So as long as Nick Chubb is healthy and playing out there while Kareem Hunt's out, Nick Chubb's going to be a very nice option here going forward here. I don't know what the Browns matchups are off the top of my head, but just the volume based for Nick Chubb is going to be good going forward. And if you have him right now, I would try to hold him. Next, we have Joe Mixon, a guy who kind of stole from Joe Burrow today, and I do have Joe Burrow in a league, so I'm not really fond of Joe Mixon right now. But Joe Mixon had 13 carries, 64 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, also had 5 receptions for 46 yards. He continues to get it done here through the air and at the goal line. So, Joe Mixon and the almost at the Cardinals. The Bengals offense in general just had a crappy game. Joe Burrow with the interceptions, of course. But yeah, Joe Mixon finds a way to get it done here. If he's scoring touchdowns like this, you're fine. And him getting 5 receptions for 46 yards is a very good floor. That's 9.6 points right there, just based on the receiving game in full PPR. So Joe Mixon is a stud as long as he's healthy. Next, Nahim Heinz, 20.8 fantasy points against the Jets. He was missing for a long time. Nahim Heinz has not exceeded 7 points in fantasy since week 3. So he has not been relevant here for a while, but he had 6 carries for 74 yards. That's a lot of yards per carry. I'm not good at math. That's like over 10. That's freaking crazy. All right, had 6 targets, 4 receptions, 34 yards as well. So he had that one really cool play where he was reversing fields and had the touchdown on the rushing play. Nahim Heinz won't be scoring 20 every week, and it's very tough to know when to start him, but I guess there are certain matches where Nahim Heinz will be relevant. I just don't know how to predict those. For wide receivers, Elijah Moore had 27 fantasy points on the week, 27.4, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 84 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. He had that one touchdown where he was wide open. I was a fan of Elijah Moore coming out of Ole Miss. He was one of my favorite receivers. I'm sure a lot of people that follow fantasy football know other fantasy football people that love Elijah Moore. It's just a common crush that fantasy people have. But Elijah Moore's a guy I like a lot. The Jets are not the best landing spot for him, and there's a lot of quarterback uncertainty with that team. So, I'm sure Elijah Moore will be looked at as a guy to add next week. I don't know how I feel about him going forward. I want to look at the snap counts and all that stuff going first. But hey, tune in for Monday's show as I go over that stuff. Devonta Smith's a guy I had as a sit candidate as well, and I was not a fan of the matchup. Now, the Chargers had a couple of cornerbacks out, which definitely helped in this scenario. But Jalen Hurts was actually passing the ball more than I thought this week, and Devonta Smith only had 6 targets, but he made a lot out of it. So he had 5 receptions, 116 yards, and a receiving touchdown, had 22.6 points on the week. So he was very efficient in this game. I have to be honest about that. So if I can go back, yeah, I would have changed my mind, of course. But, he had a good game based on the efficiency, and, he's going to have weeks, as I said in a previous video, where he's going to spike. He's going to have weeks like this where he puts up 25 points, and then weeks where he puts up 4. So it depends on the game script for the Eagles. How much does Jalen Hurts pass the ball? A lot of it is factored in here, but this was a good week for Devonta Smith, and hopefully you guys started him. Next, we have Keenan Allen, who had 22.4 full-point PPR points in week number 9. He had 13 targets, 12 receptions, 104 yards. It's a shame he could not find the end zone, of course, but Keenan Allen still had a great day, so he is the number 1 guy in this offense, as we know. Mike Williams, they're saying he's battling some type of an injury. I forget if it was a back injury or a knee injury, but Mike Williams is not 100% healthy right now. He's honestly more of just like a decoy. We'll see if he gets healthy, but Keenan Allen's still the number 1 guy as a receiver in this Chargers offense. Next, we have a guy who I don't know how to pronounce the first name. Is it Olamide? I know it's Zacchaeus, but I don't know the first name. Anyway, the Falcons receiver Zacchaeus comes in at number 4. He had 20.8 fantasy points on the day. Only had 3 targets, so he made the most out of it. 3 receptions, 58 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So obviously with 3 targets, you can't be playable going forward. It's kind of just like it's a random week here. Good for Zacchaeus, of course, but yeah, you can't start him going forward. And lastly, Marquise Brown had 20.6 full PPR points in week 9. It was a weird game. I was playing Marquise Brown in a matchup, and he had like 3 points in the 4th quarter, and I was like, okay, we're looking good. And next thing I know, the guy has 20 points. Most of it was late 4th quarter / overtime, so Marquise Brown got it done eventually here, but it was not looking good for a while. Had 12 targets, 9 receptions, 116 yards. Of course, it would have been better if he found the end zone, but yeah, Marquise Brown, of course, is the wide receiver 1 here. Rashad Bateman's getting more involved here as the weeks go on, but still, oh my God, Matthew Stafford just missed a layup of a touchdown to Van Jefferson. All right, so Marquise Brown's going to have, some weeks where it doesn't look pretty. He's had a week of 7 points, 8 points, but he's also going to have these monster weeks here. So if you found the end zone, it would have been even better, but we'll take 20.6 here from Marquise Brown. On to tight ends, George Kittle. Welcome back to the lineup. He had 8 targets, 6 catches, 101 yards, a receiving touchdown, also lost a fumble. But this was against a very good fantasy defense against tight ends, and George Kittle went out there and had a good performance, of course. Now, the thing about Kittle is, 1 is staying healthy, got to see that, but number 2 is a possible quarterback change. Now the Niners fall to 3-5, I think their record is, so they may be at that point soon where they think about going with Trey Lance because he is the future. Jimmy Garoppolo was supposed to be the win-now type quarterback, so pay attention to that. I don't know what George Kittle's production is going to be like when Trey Lance is the quarterback, but obviously Jimmy Garoppolo is the better pocket passer right now, so that may impact some of the pass catchers in San Francisco, but good to see Kittle back in the lineup and putting up a good performance. Next, we have Travis Kelsey coming off that down week against the Giants. This week put up 5 catches, 68 yards, and a receiving touchdown. It pretty much came on 2 plays. He had a receiving touchdown, I think, in the 1st quarter. Then, one of the later plays in the game to put the game away, basically had a long catch of 25 yards or so to put that game away against Green Bay. So, Travis Kelsey, it's good to see him back and putting up good numbers. I still have slight concerns if he's fully healthy, but what are you going to do? You can't trade Travis Kelsey. I mean, you could, but what are you going to get back? You know what I mean? So you got to ride the wave here. Hopefully he's healthy going forward, has a good matchup next week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Next, we have Darren Waller. Did not find the end zone, but had a good day against the Giants. Had 11 targets, 7 catches, 92 receiving yards. The Giants are not very good against tight ends, so no surprise there, but Derek Carr was looking his way very often, and we have to keep this in mind, of course, with now Henry Ruggs out of the lineup. We have to realize that Darren Waller might get more targets. So in his recent weeks, Darren Waller saw 5 targets. He had 8 targets. He had 7 targets in his past 3 games or so. So now with Henry Ruggs out, do we start to see more Darren Waller targets? Keep that in mind. Maybe he's a player we should trade for going forward. Next, we have Steven Anderson, a guy that I think was once with the Texans and the Patriots. I always liked him, but never really stuck anywhere. But he had 4 catches, 39 yards, and a receiving touchdown in this game. So not much relevance going forward. Of course, it's not the biggest game in the world. I had Donald Parham on here, but Jeff Swaim found himself into the top 5 now. So Jeff Swaim, back-to-back 12-point weeks, had a 4-catch day, 29 yards, and a receiving touchdown. So not a big game. Jeff Swaim obviously is just not a guy you want to start, but Donald Parham, I'll still mention him. Parham's a pretty interesting guy going forward, but only had 3 targets, had 39 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Parham's a good athlete, but playing next to Jared Cook and Steven Anderson, it's not the best situation there for Chargers tight ends right now, but I do like the talent of Donald Parham, but you can't really trust him going forward, I feel like. For flex guys that did not make it at their respective positions, we have Alvin Kamara. Now, Kamara's scaring the crap out of me, not because of Kamara himself, but the whole Mark Ingram thing. I talked about that last week, how Mark Ingram came in and Alvin Kamara saw like the least amount of work he's had in a long time, maybe the whole season. And once again, Kamara only saw 13 carries. So I may talk about Kamara as like a sell high type guy. We'll talk about it. But yeah, I'm a little concerned based on the Mark Ingram thing. Anyway, Kamara had 13 carries, 50 yards, had a rushing touchdown that kind of saved his day, 4 receptions and 54 yards. So it's still a good game. It's still good production, but without that touchdown, that's a 13-point day, and now Mark Ingram's in here stealing like some carries and some targets. It's frustrating. So honestly, if you can trade Alvin Kamara to a guy who still values Kamara as like a top 3 running back and get very good return for him, I mean, you might as well do it. You know what I mean? So as long as Mark Ingram's there, we know Sean Payton trusts Mark Ingram. It's gonna suck. I mean, I'm not gonna act like Alvin Kamara is gonna suck going forward, but it's not going to be the Alvin Kamara we knew the first 8 weeks of the season. So I'm a little concerned there. If you have to keep Kamara, that's fine. But I'm just saying, if you can trade Kamara to a guy who values him very, very highly, I think you should probably do that. Next, we have a guy that I have not heard of until today. Malik Turner had 7 targets, 5 catches, 33 yards, and 2 touchdowns for the Dallas Cowboys. Turner had no catches up until today, so that's no shocker. So if you were the one person out there that started Malik Turner, congrats to you. But anyway, he didn't do anything until the fourth quarter. I feel like the Cowboys had a couple of garbage time touchdowns, and Dak Prescott was for some reason still in that game. By the way, my evaluation on the Dak Prescott situation was correct. Dak Prescott was horrible for like 3 quarters. He had like 5 fantasy points through 3 quarters, then had garbage time, up the wazoo in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, he put up a lot of fantasy points, but I feel like my evaluation to have Dak Prescott as a concern was correct, but he had some garbage time touchdowns. So yes, this Malik Turner fella had 2 touchdowns. So you're not going to play him going forward. It's kind of just one of those like Zacchaeus type weeks where it's like, okay, good for you, but we're probably not going to start him going forward. A guy that we will start going forward is Cordero Patterson. 9 carries, only 10 yards, but had 6 targets, 6 catches, 126 yards. That's beautiful for a running back. He had a big catch on the right sideline to get the Falcons in field goal range for the Younghoe Koo game-winning field goal. So Cordero Patterson's awesome. If you picked him up, congrats. Hold on to him. Matt Ryan played well once again, so that's definitely going to help there as well. Brandon Ayuk, good to see him here. So Brandon Ayuk had 18.7 on the day, had 10 last week, so maybe he's starting to earn our trust back here. The Niners have a pretty good schedule for wide receivers going forward, so Ayuk might be a good guy to buy low here. He had 8 targets, 6 catches, 89 yards, a receiving touchdown, but lost a fumble. So that's the one thing. He did lose the fumble, but was playing after that, so that's the good news, but he's always in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, so I'm sure the fumble did not help. So I can't really fully endorse buying Brandon Ayuk, but if you can pick him up in your league or get him on the very cheap, I think you should do that. Ayuk is very talented, as we know. We saw it last year. He's a first-round talent, so maybe better days are ahead for Brandon Ayuk. Tim Patrick had 18.5 fantasy points, 4 catches, 85 yards, and a receiving touchdown. I feel like a lot of it came on one play. It was a play down the left sideline against Trayvon Diggs. It was like a 50-yard or so touchdown reception, so that was pretty much his day right there. But he had 18 points, and Tim Patrick has been pretty consistent throughout the year. He had a bad week in week 7, but outside of that, he's had at least 6.9 in every game. So he had 13, 12, 14, then the 6th game, 15, 13, had a 3, 9, now 18. So Tim Patrick's been startable. With Jerry Jeudy coming back, it's a bit more concerning because of the targets, and now Noah Fant is going to come off the COVID list, and now he's going to be in the offense. So Tim Patrick's targets are not guaranteed. If you have a guy in your league that's not very smart, not very fantasy savvy, if you can sell Tim Patrick to a guy in your league, you might as well do it. Most people probably know not to buy Tim Patrick, but if you can sell him based on his production so far, I'd probably do that as well. For week 9, disappointments. We'll start at the quarterback position. Josh Allen, what happened, my guy? So the best Josh Allen was not even this Josh Allen. The best Josh Allen was the defensive Josh Allen in this game. If you guys watch Red Zone, you saw this stat. It's actually very cool. So this was the first time in NFL history since sacks have been recorded, which was like 1981 or something. This was the first time a guy with the identical name sacked a guy with the same name. I definitely said that wrong. But anyway, Josh Allen sacked Josh Allen. That was the first time a guy with the same name sacked a quarterback with the same name. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, so Josh Allen had 264 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, no touchdowns in general. 2 interceptions, had 50 rushing yards, but also lost the fumble at the end of that game. So Josh Allen crappy performance. It's been kind of a weird year. I mean, Josh Allen, up until this point, has had at least 17 in every game, so he has not hurt you yet. This was the one bad week, but the Bills' offense in general has had some games where they've looked bad. Even last week when Josh Allen put up 29, the Bills' offense looked terrible through 3 quarters. So the Bills' offense has had times where they have just not looked right, and, it is what it is. So Josh Allen, you're keeping him. I mean, you can't really sell quarterbacks, I feel like, so you're keeping Josh Allen. Better days are probably ahead. He plays the Jets next week, so that should be a better matchup, but yeah, it's disappointing, but this hopefully is the one bad week he has. Next, we have Patrick Mahomes, 10.4 fantasy points. Mahomes' past 3 weeks have been not good. 8 points in week 7, 15 points in week 8, and then 10 this week, so are we at the point where we drop Patrick Mahomes? No, I'm kidding. You don't drop Patrick Mahomes. But, are we at the point where we maybe bench him? I mean, let's look at next week's matchup. Next week, he plays the Las Vegas Raiders, which they've had a good secondary so far this year, honestly. But they might be in a shootout type game. So I guess Mahomes, based on the high scoring aspect, you probably stick with him. But, Mahomes is not a guaranteed start right now. If you have a better option somehow, then I get it. But Patrick Mahomes has not been great recently. 166 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, which thank God saved his day, kinda, and -2 rushing yards. So it was a weird game script. I will say the Packers offense did nothing up until midway through the 4th quarter. So it was mostly just run and not do anything stupid. So a lot of the Chiefs offense was not pushing the ball down the field. A lot of conservative stuff for their standards, but Mahomes, you're going to hang on to. I mean, if you can sell Mahomes based on the name value and get who would you get in return for Mahomes based on name value? I'm trying to think, honestly. But I don't know. If you can get another top 5 type quarterback just based on the name, then you may as well do it. If you can get Tom Brady for Patrick Mahomes, yeah, you do that. You know what I mean? Something like that. But I don't know if someone in your league's going to do it. Maybe try this. Try to trade Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if I want to say this. I was going to say trade Mahomes for Matthew Stafford, but do I want to do that? That's a questionable one. That's one where I'd actually think about it. Anyway, what I'm saying is if you can trade Patrick Mahomes and the person buying him thinks you're getting the number 1 player in fantasy, do that. But, Mahomes hopefully has better days ahead because it probably can't get much worse. Joe Burrow, I briefly mentioned before when talking about Joe Mixon. Burrow had 9.38 fantasy points today. The problem was, of course, the turnovers, had 2 interceptions, but the other problem was Joe Mixon stole the touchdowns. Joe Mixon had 2 rushing touchdowns, and Joe Burrow was left with 0 touchdowns, so that obviously hurt his day, but had a lot of passing yards, but just, the Bengals offense was terrible today. Joe Burrow and the Bengals head into their bye. They do have some tough matchups coming up. They play Las Vegas out the bye. They play Pittsburgh in week 12, Los Angeles Chargers in week 13. So, once again, if you can try and sell Burrow, I guess you can take that route. But once again, not many people are buying quarterbacks in your leagues probably. So, good luck with that. But yeah, Burrow's schedule coming up is not the best going forward. Derek Carr coming in at 12.34. May have been a stream start for you guys, but was not the best performance. Had 296 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a fumble lost. So, yeah, Derek Carr with the turnovers was not great today. If you take the turnovers away, that's probably probably a 16-point day, so it's not awful. But, yeah, 12 points is not good for your starting quarterback, and you kind of have to hold off on Derek Carr for now until we see how he adjusts to not having his deep threat in Henry Ruggs. Now, they get Desean Jackson, as I mentioned. Can Desean Jackson be what Ruggs was? I mean, probably not. I mean, Ruggs was literally 11 years younger or 12 years younger, but maybe that helps Derek Carr in some type of way. We'll see. But, yeah, I would kind of hold off on starting Derek Carr right now. They play Kansas City, as I mentioned, next week, so we're going to fall back into that trap of, should we start Derek Carr? Based on the matchup, we probably should. I'll talk about that going forward, but I don't know. Derek Carr is a little concerning based on, losing one of his best receivers recently. Next at running back, we have Aaron Jones, who had 12 carries, 53 yards, had 2 targets, but no catches. I mean, A.J. Dillon had, I think, 8 carries and 4 targets, so there is a workload concern. It's getting closer and closer to 50-50 as the year goes on. It was weird. So A.J. Dillon was, barely getting used the first few weeks, but recently, A.J. Dillon, the backup running back, has been playing a lot more. So Aaron Jones may have some weeks where he doesn't look that great. In week 7, he had 8 points, but in week 1 he had 4, which was a bad week for the Packers in general. But he may have some weeks going forward where he's not going to have the best fantasy performances because the backup A.J. Dillon might get the targets or the touchdowns, and it's going to hurt Aaron Jones. So if I'm an Aaron Jones owner, I'm a bit concerned about the backup running back A.J. Dillon. But once again, you can't really sell Aaron Jones right now because it's at a low point. If you can find someone in your fantasy league who's going to buy Aaron Jones at full price, then go for it, because it kind of hurts having like a 60-40 split right now in that backfield. But for Aaron Jones, there's going to be better days ahead, especially in the easier matchups. Maybe if you want to sell him, you wait till next week because they play Seattle next week, who's very bad against running backs. So maybe Aaron Jones has one of those like 18 carry, 2 touchdown games, and then you sell him after that. So hold off on that and let Aaron Jones play against Seattle first before you trade him. Chase Edmonds, not much to say here. Only had 0.3 fantasy points, had 1 carry before leaving the game with the injury. Really depends how long he's out for. So if he's out for a few weeks, obviously, James Conner is going to be, as I said, a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, but maybe Eno Benjamin's a guy to pick up as well, because James Conner is not the best pass-catching back. He's not very elusive at this point in his career. He's not old, but he just doesn't look that great sometimes. Anyway, so maybe Eno Benjamin's a good start, or not a start, but a good pickup going forward. I'll go over that in the waiver video. But yeah, Chase Edmonds being out would suck for this offense. He's been pretty good recently, so not what you want to see there if you're a Chase Edmonds owner. Next, we have Mike Davis. This is one I got right, so I nailed this one. 2.8 fantasy points. I had him as a sit against the New Orleans Saints. There was one point where the Falcons offense got to the 1-yard line, and I was like, oh my God, here comes a Mike Davis touchdown, of course, but it didn't happen. So anyway, Mike Davis had 9 carries for 13 yards, only 2 targets, and 1 reception for 5 yards. So Mike Davis in week 7 had a 1-point week, then last week had an 11-point week. Last week was the time to sell him, but I don't know. You can't trust Mike Davis going forward. He plays Dallas next week, who is pretty good against fantasy running backs so far this year, so that's not a great matchup either. So I don't know. The whole Mike Davis experience may be on hold for now, but if something happens, we'll see going forward. But yeah, I can't really trust Mike Davis going forward at this moment in time. So right as I talked about getting something right, I got this one wrong. Boston Scott, I had him as one of my favorite starts, and Boston Scott only had 4 points in this game, 10 carries for 40 yards. Jordan Howard had the better day because he found the end zone. Now, I will say Boston Scott, I think, had 2 opportunities inside the 5-yard line to get in the end zone, had 2 carries, didn't get in the end zone, so that kind of killed his day. So if he found the end zone and had a 10-point day, it would have been like, okay, that's fine. But the fact that he did not find the end zone leaves him with 4 points. So it's tough to honestly trust any Eagles running back going forward. It's like it's such a tough situation. I'll look at the snap counts when they come out, but it felt like there was a lot of Jordan Howard in this game. We saw Kenneth Gainwell at some point in this game as well. So I don't know. It's a situation I kind of want to avoid. I was off of Boston Scott last week at this time. Then he has the great game, and I'm like, okay, we could start, Boston Scott, and now it's like, no, you can't play him. I don't know. I mean, it's a weird situation, but 10 carries for 40 yards is not going to get it done for you in fantasy. For wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb had 4.3 fantasy points. I had him in a lineup, and that was a killer, but he did have 9 targets, so it's not the worst thing. It's not like he had 2 targets. He had 9 targets, which is good, of course, only 2 receptions for 23 yards. Dak Prescott missed him on what would have been like a 60-yard touchdown. He overthrew him, so that would have changed his entire day. CeeDee Lamb is still like a buy for me. I would still buy CeeDee Lamb coming off this bad game. Yes, the Cowboys are running the ball more than I would like for their wide receivers, but still, I mean, CeeDee Lamb has found a way to still be good despite that. He's had some down weeks in the past. I mean, CeeDee Lamb had a 3-point week in week number 4, now had a 4-point week in week 9, so it happens, but CeeDee Lamb for the most part should be okay. He plays Atlanta next week, so him and Amari Cooper should have better weeks in week number 10. Next we have Tyreek Kill. So Tyreek Kill had 27 last week. This time he's back down to earth, only 7.3 points. Had 11 targets, but 4 catches, 37 yards. So based on the target share, I would still buy Tyreek Hill. So a week prior, he had 18 targets against the Giants. He had 9 targets in week 7. Like, he's getting a ton of targets here. So I think Tyreek Hill is a pretty obvious buy. He even had 12 targets in week 6. So he's getting the targets. It's just sometimes it just doesn't happen. Like, this was a week where I guess some weird stuff happened, and it is what it is. Sometimes guys have bad games. But Tyreek Hill is getting a lot of targets. So that's a guy I'm looking to buy right now. If you can get him on the cheap coming off this game, good for you. But yeah, this should not continue going forward. Next, we have Amari Cooper, 5.7 points. I think someone asked me if they should start Cooper, and I said yes. But his other option was like Mike Williams. So it's not the worst. I mean, they both sucked anyway. But anyway, Amari Cooper had 5 targets, 2 catches, 37 yards. Not what you want to see. he's another guy who's had some weeks in the past where he's had some down weeks. He had a 5-point week, another 5-point week, and now another 5-point week. So his lowest has been 5 this year, which it hurts, but it's not like getting 0 or 1 or 2. So, I mean, it could be worse, obviously. Anyway, Amari Cooper, I expect him to bounce back next week against the Atlanta Falcons. So I would hold for now. Don't sell him on the cheap, and hopefully better days are ahead. Last, we have Cortland Sutton, who had 3.9 fantasy points. Now, this one I'm concerned about. Cortland Sutton's a guy who last week had 4 targets. This week had 2. So his target share is going very much downwards, and it correlates with Jerry Jeudy coming back to the lineup. So Jerry Jeudy came back in week 8, and ever since then he's had 6 targets in 2 games. So Cortland Sutton's a guy that I don't want to trust going forward. I guess we should have tried to trade him when Jerry Jeudy came back, but it's too late for that now. So, they play Philly next week, another tough defense in the secondary. So I would probably look to bench Cortland Sutton next week. Now that I said that, I'll probably score a touchdown. But yeah, Cortland Sutton can't be trusted right now, and Jerry Jeudy coming back and even Noah Fant coming back next week is going to hurt him a lot going forward. At the tight end position, let's go out of order here. So Dallas Goedert, 7.3 fantasy points. His first 2 games without Zach Ertz were good. He had a 12-point week and a 13-point week, and it was like, okay, we're fine here. But this week only had 7, which is not a killer for the tight end position, but I think we expected more against a Chargers defense that was not good against tight ends. So he had 6 targets, 3 catches, 43 yards. 6 targets is not too bad, but you expected a better game here from Dallas Goedert. I would still buy low while I can. Now, while I do say that, he does have 2 tough matchups coming up, so I don't know. I do think the targets will be there, but the matchups are not great. But the tight end position sucks as it is in general. So honestly, I would probably buy Dallas Goedert and use the bad matchups coming up as an excuse to get him cheaper. So hopefully you can do that. I might try that myself, honestly. Next we'll go to Zach Ertz, who was a guy I had as a sit this week, so I got that one right. 5 targets, 3 catches, 27 yards. Honestly, I thought he'd be used more in this game because, DeAndre Hopkins was out and AJ Green was out, but only 5 targets. Of course, Arizona's offense was great in this game, and 90% of it was James Conner, but still, Zach Ertz did not have the best day. I would hold him going forward. There's probably better days ahead, especially with Kyler Murray coming back, so don't trade Zach Ertz for now. Don't drop him. CJ Uzama, however you pronounce it once again, I don't know. Against Cleveland, had 5 targets, 4 catches, 24 yards. Once again, having 6.4 at tight end is not the worst thing in the world, but it's also not great. So he's a guy that is pretty much touchdown or bust, like any tight end out there, for most of them at least. So, CJ Uzama, it's hard to trust him. Now there's a week 10 bye for the Bengals, so if you want to drop Uzama, go ahead, you can do that. Obviously not a guy worth hanging on to if you need the roster spot. And lastly, Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper had a 3-point day, 2 targets, 2 catches, and 14 yards. The Browns put up 41 points in this game, so not what you want to see there, of course. Austin Hooper is tough to trust here. Even Jarvis Landry, who I liked, had a down game in this one. Most of it was Nick Chubb and Donovan Peoples-Jones, so, pretty unlikely. Nick Chubb's not unlikely, but Donovan Peoples-Jones is pretty unlikely. We'll talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones in the waiver video coming out because, he's an interesting guy now with Odell Beckham off the team. All right, so, yeah, Austin Hooper, tough to trust him going forward. He has some tough matchups coming up here. Plays the Patriots next week, who right now are 30th. The 30th worst matchup for fantasy tight ends right now, so I'd probably not start Austin Hooper next week either. So anyway, that'll pretty much do it. This is probably a long-ass video, so I apologize. Anyway, I should put it in podcast form. I might make a podcast one day. If I get enough fantasy viewers going forward, we'll do a podcast. We'll see. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Waiver video coming out sometime on Monday, maybe early Tuesday. We'll find out. Anyway, no, wait. Okay, no, this is the reaction video. Fantasy waivers will be Tuesday. I'll try to get it out by Monday night. That's what I'll go for. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you next time.